Step into the fascinating realm of industrial metals, where steel prices fluctuate and market indicators are the pulse of an ever-evolving industry. Welcome to Cup of Joe, the metal podcast paying homage to our founder, Joseph T. Ryerson. Settle in, savor a cup of Joe, and let the conversation begin.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Cup of Joe. I'm Mike Carrazzo, joined as always by Nick Webb. Nick, what's going on?
Not a whole lot, man. How you doing this end of your summer?
Yeah, pretty good. Kind of gloomy outside today in Chicago.
Sure is.
Been a break from some of the higher temperatures, but yeah, kind of gloomy. So setting up for fall, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
How about you? How's your summer going?
It's going really well. As we mentioned on the last Cup of Joe, we're getting into the final innings before I go get hitched here in about 2.5 weeks. So, as we mentioned, we're going to have the Cup of Joe delayed by about a week into the following Thursday. But yeah, exciting times.
As a risk manager, have you run the analysis and everything that could go wrong the day of the wedding and kind of hedged your bets?
There are far too many things. That's why you get a wedding planner.
Well, we're welcomed today by Chris Lyons. He's the Vice President Commercial with North American Stainless. Chris, welcome to Cup of Joe.
Hey, thanks very much. It's a pleasure to be here with you guys.
Yeah, and we're going to be tackling a topic that was suggested by one of our colleagues. Shout out to Haley Katz. She suggested that, hey, it would be great to understand a little bit more what goes into lead times, touch a little bit on capacity utilization. So we thought bring on somebody from the largest producer of stainless steel in North America to really discuss what that's all about. So before we dive into it, Chris, would you mind telling us a little bit about NAS and your role there?
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to. So first, NAS is based in Kentucky, and that's where all of our manufacturing is located. So to try to find it on a map, basically we're on the Kentucky side of the Ohio River, halfway between Cincinnati and Louisville. We're a fully integrated producer of stainless steel, both flat products and long products. We were founded in 1990, and while we are now 34 years new, 34 years young, we're still very much a growing company. To kind of emphasize this, only a few years ago, we announced a $240 million CapEx that's going to boost our capacity by 20%. And that influence is going to happen both from our flat products and our long products. So it's in our 34 years, it's been a constant reinvestment into the business, both expanding the product mix that we came here with, but also diversifying the products that we bring to market. So it's been a fun ride. And it's one that I don't think is going to be stopping anytime soon. My role,
Chris, sorry to interrupt. Is that investment going to take place at the same location? It's essentially just an expansion of the existing manufacturing.
Yes, sir. So we've got a series of investments that's happening within our melt shop, hot rolling mill, cold rolling mill, and then in our long products. So all here in Kentucky, and it will lend to allowing us to provide more of the products that we currently produce today. But it's also, focused on allowing us to further diversify. You mentioned one of the topics is going to be capacity utilization. And part of the reason for this investment is the surge demand that we saw during the times that followed COVID and the inability for us to fulfill all of that surge demand. We want to be a source for the stainless steel consumers in the U.S. that they can rely on in all conditions. And, our focus is to continue investing in this marketplace and being a trusted supplier that not only people can count on for the current needs, but their future investments and their future growth.
Well, that's all. Thanks for setting that up. So let's dive into the discussion if we can. Lead times generally, I don't know about you, Nick, but I don't know all that goes into making a lead time? What do those numbers mean? I mean, we publish them on a monthly basis for our customers, just, as a general speaking, for example, I've got stainless steel lead times right now. They're different by product, right? So cold rolled around 6 to 8 weeks, CMP and PMP about 4 to 7 weeks. So what does that mean? Like what is a lead time, at the very rudimentary level, and I guess how are those made?
Yeah. So, I mean, all the lead time truly is a date in which we're telling our customer base when we can have material ready if they placed an order today. It's not really any more complicated than that. Now, how we make lead times, that can be a little more complicated because, as you alluded, not all products are created equal. So, I would say let me first start by saying, each of the basic processes of making stainless steel is essentially the same. But the method of production can be different. So things like how long molten metal is refined in the melt shop, that can vary depending on the alloy. The speeds that different alloys of metal run through an anneal and pickle line. The necessity to batch products together. So if I'm talking about ferritics versus austenitic, they need to run in batches. If we're polishing material at our polishing line, we always polish from wide to narrow. So you can't run a 36 wide and then throw a 60 wide on those same belts because the wear patterns of the belts would therefore be passed upon that 60 wide. So there are intricacies within the production process that necessitate us to try to align what we advertise to the market as our lead times relative to our intentions of how we produce and the capacities of the different lines. So all these factors play a role in creating a lead time. But then next, lead time for a given product is in fact impacted by, say, two different factors. First, just the basic time needed to produce it. And then second, the capacity to produce it. So whichever of those two events come first is essentially what triggers the movement of the lead time going out, for example. And then last, this is something that in relationship to lead times is very important. When we present to the market our lead times, we're only making available roughly 4 to 8 weeks out into the future. While it may seem odd that we would pass on the opportunity to extend our lead times, secure a bigger book of business for NAS, it sounds like the right strategy, but it's not the right strategy. And let me explain why. This isn't something that we've always promoted and managed. In fact, in 2014, we kept extending lead time. So as we filled the capacity, we just kept pushing it out with no reservation. And the lead times can continue to run until we fulfilled the full capacity of 2014. Right about this time, it was August of 2014, we said, guys, we've filled our full capacity for the balance of the year. It felt good at the time. But what we learned is a good portion of those orders were placed out of panic, out of fear of not having supply. This created an impossible task for the purchasing teams of our customers that ended up creating quite a large problem for themselves. And if it's a problem for our customer, ultimately it's a problem for us too. Our customer base was left really with a misaligned inventory that was high on the items that they didn't need and the low on the items for which they did need. And it lent itself to a painful correction that we saw in early 2015. So since we've used a method that we limit the forward access to prevent those type of situations, and it's proven successful. It allows our customer base to make good decisions on purchases because they have better knowledge coming from their customer, both in the forecast and the feedback. Now, there are times for which, we've seen these surge demand events that might put the market into a period of allocation. We had period of allocation prior to COVID. For NAS, what we do is we use historical data, and we utilize that such that if a customer has been placing positions with NAS prior to those allocation events, we're supporting them to those levels during the period of allocation. But if a customer was instead, maybe they were heavy on import, those tons weren't part of our history, and therefore if they need to buy them domestically now, it's going to be a challenge, and they're not going to get the support to the full level of their need. So that's an aspect of that buying domestic truly carries a value in that it offers a security of supply in all market conditions.
Yeah, so Chris, you mentioned the cycle you went through, or maybe the panic buying that you saw back in 2014 that caused you to change your plans. I'm curious, how do you compare 2014 to maybe what we saw in 2021, 2022 with regards to the supply chain bottlenecks and things like that? I would argue that we did see another wave of kind of panic buying, trying to make sure that people had inventory. How would you compare those two situations?
So the only difference, the basis, the way the two events came about was a similar circumstance where there was a surge in demand, which created tightness of supply, and the result caused a level of panic buying. The difference that in 2014 versus 2021, 22 was typical allocation event is around a 6 to 8 month life. We typically see periods of allocation every 3 to 4 years, and usually they're at the tail end of a down market where everybody's trying to drive inventories down, and they're basing their inventory and days on hand of low sales, and then you get a spring back in the market conditions, and then it's a rush not only to fulfill that higher demand, but to reallocate the inventory to days of supply to that new volume level. So I think the events were very similar in those two periods. The difference is in the period of COVID, the entire world was on the same cycle. The demand in foreign markets was similarly high and underserved. So the ability to access outside the United States for supplemental supply was not there. And that elongated the process. That lies the difference between 14 event versus say a 21 event.
So coming back a little bit to, you talked a little about the prioritization, or how you ultimately take different product types, different widths, and feed that into your system to make sure that you've got it ordered in the right way, or I guess you're processing it in the appropriate way. How do you prioritize different customers? If you've got, let's say you've got 10,000 customers, I'm making up numbers, but let's say they all want stainless steel. How does NAS or any stainless steel mill prioritize who gets what, particularly in an allocation type situation? Because you almost have to, I don't want to say pick favorites, but do you pick favorites? How do you allocate that?
There's a number of factors that's gonna contribute to that, but I would say that the top factors is going to be consistency. When we're a manufacturing operation that has a high built-in fixed cost, and peaks and valleys are challenging for us. Steady state really fits us, our model well. So, we really value a customer that brings a level of consistency with how they engage with us. That's one thing. Obviously, we're looking to align ourselves with customers that have a good product mix. There's products that run through our mill very easily, and there's products that are very much a challenge. And we don't mind to do those products that are a challenge. We embrace those products that are a challenge, because typically the cycles of demand on those products vary, and they're not necessarily aligned with the most commodity of commodity. So there's some stability that comes with those products. But our interest in those products are greatest when they're being purchased by somebody that buys a very diverse mix. If you're only buying the difficult and hard, it's not quite as appealing as somebody that's buying the full complement of products. So those are ways that you can kind of position yourselves to the top of the line. And like I said, we utilize our historical activity as the baseline of how we establish, and those factors certainly play in. A great example is during this period of allocation, our broad product mix, we could have narrowed that scope of that product mix during the period of allocation, and the volume that we would have shipped from off of our lines out of this facility would have increased quite significantly. But that would have been a short-sighted perspective, right? I mean, our broad product mix is one that we are proud of and value, and that's a long-term strategy. So not once did we turn our back on a historical piece of business that we've supplied, because demand is really high, capacity is utilized to the fullest extent, and we could ship more volume if we kick this out. That's not how we manage the business. Now, if maybe we didn't jump on new opportunities, but we certainly didn't turn our back on historical activities, and supported our customers through that period, regardless of just how quickly and well the material ran through our operation.
So it sounds like there's got to be a high level of familiarity with the customer to have that prioritization. I may be putting words in your mouth, but maybe if somebody leans more heavy on import and hasn't been doing much domestically with either yourselves or any other domestic suppliers, maybe they fall a little lower on the list. Is that fair to?
Yes, 100%.
Okay.
And I found that interesting so it's like a diversity in product type, right? I would think if you're running the same, if you have like a heavy order on one product, it's more about the diversification of the products would kind of get prioritization, if you will.
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. And maybe metal buyers can just email you and ask if they can get put to the top of that list. Maybe.
Hey, Chris, speaking about imports, question on your raw material base. I've actually had the good fortune of being to your facility in Ghent, Kentucky, and know that all of your material is made from scrap of different materials. Is that scrap? Is any of that foreign based, or is the majority of that domestic?
That's all of our scrap's going to be domestic based. Yes.
Okay. So you've got no reliance on like port issues, anything like
Correct.
that. Okay.
Correct.
Because I've been seeing some rumors flying up that there may be another port strike here in the next coming weeks, coming months.
Well, that leads into a nice situation or a good question, right? Because you talk about like COVID was obviously an event that no one really saw coming, right? An impact on supply and demand, but I mean, there's got to be a lot of those, right? Like the port impact, the port closure Nick just mentioned. So like, how do you kind of account for the unexpected, if you will, that are kind of more on the consistent basis, like maybe the port closures or material availability, things like that?
I think one of the things that as mentioned with Nick, our raw materials largely are U.S. only. Our dependency for production is there's always potential for problems and interruptions to those consumables, but they're limited in scope, being primarily domestic supplied. So that gives us a great amount of security with our supply base of all of our inputs and consumables. And for us, I think that one of the things that we do not do is we do not speculate, we do not hedge. Our method of risk management is trying to manage our inventory and get good turns of our raw materials, maintain a healthy level of work in process to support our orders, but not excess. And when the market goes down, our production goes down, and we do not produce on forecast or speculation. We produce against orders on the books, and I think while maybe there's times when we miss opportunities when market hits bottom and bounces. It's we're not in the game of trying to forecast and predict. We're in the game of making steel and making it efficient and fast. And so that's really what drives us. Now, it's certainly, as you would expect, we have to do forecast and provide guidance and expectations, and it's a challenge. We've got a customer base that's primarily stockist. Roughly 70% of our customer base is distribution, and so that disconnects us from the real manufacturer in the field. So we're very dependent on getting feedback from our customer base that's closely linked to what they're gathering themselves. Of course, we follow various economic indicators, trying to get a read on when things change, either for the good or for the bad. But in the end, what we trust most is to manage our inventory, keep our lead time short, and produce to the demand of our customer base.
So more of like an operational risk management than a price risk management or commodity risk management. Got it.
Correct.
Are you running lines like 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, or how does it work?
We typically do.
Okay.
One thing that you mentioned previously that we didn't touch on, I'll touch on now, is capacity utilization. And basically what capacity utilization is what percent of your theoretical production capacity are we operating at, right? So if you can make 10 units and you're only making 6, you're at 60% utilization. But that utilization is a lot more complex than it seems in my example, because as we talked about earlier, all products are not created equal. So what's the baseline of your capacity? Is it if you look at our capacity utilization today, for example, taking the product mix that we have, we're below 70%. But quite honestly, if you look at our true capacity, if we were to make the most efficient product, it's going to be lower than that. So that is a bit, capacity utilization can be a bit of a slippery slope, because the reference point can change on the basis of what you're utilizing as your mix to determine your full capacity.
Did you say that would be lower if we were running at full capacity? Okay.
Correct.
Gotcha.
It would be lower if we were benchmarking on the idea that we only produce 304 heavier gauge 48 and 60 wide.
Got it. Okay.
So that's where the product mix plays a role in establishing some of these benchmarks.
What's like an average capacity utilization, would you say?
I would say, in a healthy market, you want to be somewhere between 80 and 90%. I think that would be somewhat of the norm. Obviously, when you have surge periods, you can be in the 90s and even near 100%. But in a healthy marketplace where demand is healthy and consistent in that 80% range.
Okay. So then you have things like planned outages and things that you account for, right? That, I mean, they're communicated pretty well in advance, right? So folks know that there's going to be an outage.
For sure.
To account for that.
Okay. One of the things that we've adopted is trying to do some preventive maintenance throughout the course of the year. That's pre-scheduled, and it allows us to and they're smaller scale maintenance. So the impact on the business is very minor. They're scheduled in advance such that we can prepare our production before and after in order to make our ability to supply the needs of the customer. It's transparent to the customer. And what it also does is it reduces the burden of the year-end maintenance. Typically we do some larger scale maintenance in late November, early December on say the hotter end products, our hot rolling mill, our melting shop, for example. And while the outages might be a little bit larger and longer, that also comes in a period of the year where business is naturally a little bit softer, and it gives us the room to work around whatever production needs we have to fulfill customer demand without there being any noticeable interruption to the supply.
Makes sense.
Hey, Chris, maybe a bit of a curveball here, because this actually came out just yesterday, but there's an interesting headline that was kind of circulating around the carbon world with regards to the CEO of Baowu Steel. Basically came out and said they're seeing things very, very difficult within China. They made some comparisons to 2015 and even 2008, and we're saying that it's got echoes of that, at least within China. I'm curious, one, does North American Stainless see any of that? Do you get impacted by that? And he may just be talking about carbon. Obviously, you're on the stainless side, but two, as it relates to potentially a softer China, what impact does that have on imports or availability of product coming in from overseas?
Yeah, we're finding that the economic issues that's leading to the circumstance you're talking about on carbon is certainly there on stainless as well. And we have anti-dumping countervailing duties against China for their behavior back in that 2015 period. So in theory, China's not impacting us directly, but certainly their influence is there indirectly. China's methods are different than ours. We talked about earlier, if we don't have the orders, we're not producing the material. We're not speculating. And their methods is different. They're trying to utilize their capacity and they'll dump that product wherever there might be a place for it to go. So while they can't bring it here directly, they're saturating other marketplaces that are also challenged economically, and then that burden being passed on them is then forcing them to look for places, and sure, a lot of times that's here. So in spite of the fact that we have an order against China, China's still making waves. Sure. But that's also something that we make a point to keep a close eye on, what those behaviors are and what their methods of selling here are. And if there's bad behavior, we're going to be quick to address inappropriate methods of selling product in this marketplace.
That makes sense. Yeah, it seems like across a lot of different products, China just has a situation where they just have immense overcapacity that probably needs to be curtailed here in the coming years.
Yes, sir.
This could be an oddball question, but what's the longest lead time you ever experienced? And do you know what were the circumstances around that?
Well, the longest was I remember it vividly, was that August 2014 when I'm sitting here and like, we're done for the year. That would have been it. And well, like I said, while it felt good that day, I later learned that was not really something to celebrate. So that was the longest for sure in my career, at least.
And how long was that?
You had to come back to the office from the beach house, huh?
Yeah. I wish I was permitted that access. But
how long was that?
So it was in the middle of August, and we had fulfilled all the way through the end of the year. So September, October, November. So 4.5 months.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So Chris, thanks for coming on. I learned a ton about lead times and capacity utilization, and I think this will be really valuable for our audience.
Good. Thank you very much for the opportunity. It's a fun format, and certainly glad to be a part of this. This was my first time, so I enjoyed it, and thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Chris.
All right, everyone. We'll talk to you next time.
All right. Take care.